Hi, this is a short video explaining the project management assessment. You have now written, or should have written, your research report and obviously your research proposal, which you did before the research report. And now that you finished conducting your research, you need to explain how you actually managed your research project. So if we open this document and have a look, you need here to basically address each of these points. There are 7 points and some sub-points here that you need to address. So the first part relates to the resources that you use to undertake your research project. And you in particular need to explain these three things. So first of all, explain what goods and services were required to undertake your research and detail the criteria used for selection. This should be fairly straightforward. You probably used a number of resources to undertake your project, including time, computer access, consultants. You were the consultants. If you worked in a team, there would have been more consultants. Maybe you used SurveyMonkey. Maybe there were some costs involved, etc. You also need to explain how you executed processes to obtain required resources. And again, pretty straightforward. Explain how you actually gained access to the things you needed access to. Explain how you gained approvals for your research plans. For example, I would have approved your research brief before you proceeded. Maybe you talk with me as a lecturer. Maybe you talk with managers. So explain exactly what you did there. Ideally include times and dates when approvals were given. In the next section, you need to talk about research policies and procedures and legal requirements. And this one is probably a bit more tricky. So point 4, here you need to explain key provisions of relevant legislation and codes of practice and national standards that affected your research project. Um, Relevant legislation could include a number of things, and you need to do a bit of research here. But you could potentially look at spam regulations or privacy regulations and explain how you followed these codes. Um, you could, more precisely, you could look at the Spam Act of 2003 and the Privacy Act of 1988 for the first part, relevant legislation. When we look at codes of practice and national standards, I suggest you look at the Australian Market and Social Research Society. That is the governing body for market research in Australia, and they have codes of professional behaviors that should be followed when you conduct research, and you need to explain how you followed these codes. Also explain how you manage market research activities in accordance with organizational market research policy and procedures. For example, TAFE requires all research to be conducted in a safe environment. And this was why you primarily needed to focus on online surveys and social media secondary data collection. And if you were to interact with people like in focus groups or in-depth interviews or observations, you needed to discuss this with your lecturer. Now, point number 6. Explain how you reviewed and monitored the original market research and work plans to finalization. Did you reach your research objectives? Are your findings relevant and useful? What would you do different for future research projects? Simply address these points under this heading. Point number 7, again, use this as a heading and use these as subheadings as well, and just provide your answers underneath. And that basically is it. Thanks.